Hello, and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Bess Kirnie. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence branch of the American Association of University Women, one of the civic partners for this show. Today we're hosting a conversation with Ann Adams, retired superintendent and active presenter of poverty simulations in the North Country. Ann, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. You bring a wealth of experience in education to a new project, heightening community awareness for poverty in our community. To set the stage, would you tell our viewers a lot about you and your background?
Okay. I've actually lived in northern New York most of my life. After graduating from Boston High School, I went to the University of Rochester for 4 years. And then I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where for the next 11 years I worked as a teacher, a counselor, and an administrator, and also attended graduate school. In 1983, I came to Watertown, New York as their high school principal. After 7.5 years there, I went to the North Creek area where I was the superintendent of schools for 5.5 years. And then for the next 19 years until I retired, in June of 2015, I was the superintendent of Herman DeKalb Central School.
That's a lot of experience. Now, you've seen poverty here in the North Country. Is that different in any way from poverty, say, in the Ann Arbor or Michigan area?
Actually, the first 3 districts that I worked in Michigan were very, very poverty-stricken. The first one, even though it was 20 miles from Detroit, and not racially diverse, it was mostly white people that lived in that district, only had 2 districts in the entire state of the 721 districts that were poorer than it was.
Oh my, okay, wow.
So that was, although it was close to Detroit, that was also really a rural area and a rural poverty.
Okay. Now I understand that the formal name of the program that you present is Community Action Poverty Simulation, or CAPS. How did you learn about it, and who created it?
Okay, actually this simulation was created by the Missouri Association for Community Action. And I had been on the Teachers Center board here, the St. Lawrence Valley's Teachers Learning Center, for a number of years. And actually in my last meeting in June of 2015, they were talking about at the committee all the things that we had in the budget for the next year. And one of the items was this poverty simulation kit and how great it was. The only problem they had was that they had to make sure they had someone that could do the simulations that had somewhat of a flexible schedule. So that summer I did one simulation with Susan Dodds, who was the Teacher Center director at that time. And since then I've done probably close to 30 of them, centering on school districts in St. Lawrence County. I've been in most of them. I've done all the Watertown City School District employees, and I've also done the Copenhagen School District up to this point.
Well, so much for a relaxing retirement, Ann. You put a lot of energy into this. You know, in preparing for our conversation today, I learned that there's just a wealth of data out there. You can find statistics on the effects of low income on everything from diet, nutrition, age expectancy, educational opportunities. But in the end, you end up with sheets of numbers, and I don't know how much that tells you. Tell me what a poverty simulation adds to those numbers.
Actually, it allows people to feel empathy for others that are in that situation, poverty. It also gives them a chance to experience the stress of trying to provide for your family and get to your job and make sure that you've paid your mortgage payments and your utilities and that you've gotten to the bank. The simulation gives a more real life feeling to the numbers and the sheets of paper that you get when you go to a seminar.
Yeah, and I visited a couple of simulations, and it is an impressive undertaking. it's a lot to ask, but could you just describe for our viewers what a poverty simulation event looks like? How does it work? Who's there? Where do you hold it? It's a lot.
You need a large setting where you can have a large group of people. And you have in the simulation up to 26 families that can range everything from a family of 5 to maybe a retired person that's either retired and living on their retirement or disabled and living on the disability. In the center of the room, you have groups of chairs that simulate the family. So there's 5 chairs for one family, 3 chairs for another family. You can have up to 80 participants that play the family roles.
80.
Yeah, and then you have 8 babies that can be played by 8 stuffed dolls that we have. And then along the outside of the room, whether you're in a large group instruction room or whether you're in a gym or a cafeteria, are all what we call the staffers, that are the banker, the pawnbroker, the doctor, the community action council, the mortgage people, the people you pay your utility bills to, quick cash where you can cash your checks, the employer, the school, and you break that down into 4 15-minute weeks. So you have a 15-minute week, a 5-minute weekend, a 15-minute week, a 5-minute weekend. The third week there is no school, so if you are a parent and have children of school age, you have to figure out what you're going to do with them. If you have a baby, you have to make sure that they have childcare. You may have benefits. You may not have benefits. If you don't have the benefits, you can always go to social services and apply. You may be eligible or maybe you aren't. And then you experience frustration over transportation because every place you go, you have to have a transportation pass that represents your gas or your insurance or your walking time to get to wherever you're going. And that is probably one of the hardest things to deal with in rural poverty is the transportation issue.
Wow, this is a very detailed scenario, and then each family group or single or whatever has their own script or...
Yeah. Every family has a packet that gives them a name tag, a social security card. Sometimes they have a little money, sometimes they have some transportation passes, sometimes they have an employment card or a benefits card. And then there is an instruction sheet in there that tells all the roles of the people that are in the family and gives you an idea of what you need to do and how much it's going to cost you for each week. Each of the staffers around the outside, whether it's the bank or the pawnbroker or the doctor's office, also has a packet that might have some money in it. Obviously, if you're the bank, it had loan applications. Social services has applications for benefits and applications for different kinds of assistance. So everybody that's part of this, whether you're interfaith services or childcare, has a role, and that packet tells them what their role is.
What I found was interesting in the simulation is that the families themselves, in your case, you mostly dealt with school districts, correct?
Correct.
But the people who are in the community, on the perimeter, are actual community members. One of the ones I went to, you had an armed officer there in the jail, and there was a robbery and he arrested. I mean, it was, they really get into it. So who do you choose to be the support people, the community people?
Okay, each school district that I've done this with, I've met with them or their team that's going to work on this beforehand to explain the physical setup and also to go over what they need for the volunteers and how they need to assign the families, and then encourage them in their own community to go out and recruit some people, whether they be board members or the local banker or the state policeman that was there at one of the simulations.
And another one, I was tickled because, and I won't name names, but it was a former mayor, and he was assigned to be in charge of, was it Fat Dan's Pawn?
Big Dan's Pawn Shop.
Big Dan's Pawn Shop. He was a former mayor. He really got into that role. It was wonderful to watch.
Well, we try to tell the volunteers or the staffers to be very realistic. Don't don't offer receipts unless somebody asks for them. The pawn shop owner is told not to give, for example, if you come with a tag that says you have $100 worth of jewelry, to not give you the $100 for the jewelry, to give you 50 and maybe only count out 40 in cash and hand it to you.
Oh, wow. So you're really trying to simulate, walk in the shoes of the people
Correct.
who are living this, and it's not just statistics and so on. And I understand you have a homeless population.
Right, there are 4 families that are homeless. 2 of them are single male and female with a baby, and 2 of them are elderly people.
Oh my gosh. So why is it important that we go beyond the statistics through a simulation like this?
You can look at statistics on a piece of paper, but you can't really feel what people feel when they're frustrated, and they don't have food on the table, or they haven't paid their bills, or they've been evicted. That's something that, as much as you read about it, unless you've experienced it, it's hard to have those feelings.
Yeah.
And I've done this mostly with educators who, some of them have grown up in poverty, but most now are living at somewhere in the upper middle class setting. They have said things like, I'm accomplished, I know math, I can read, and yet I found it very hard with an income this low to try to do everything I had to do, plus go to my job and get my paycheck and make sure my kids are in school. And that frustration comes through, and they're able to understand it.
Yeah, I know one of the opening instructions you give to the families is that this is not a game. You might have money that looks like game pieces, but it's not to be treated as a game, it is to be treated as a simulation. And so I know you've done it a lot, but I was so amazed that the first week when I was observing, things were kind of calm and people were reading over their instructions and conferring, and by the second week, there was an energy in that room. People were bustling around. If someone was going to be late to work, they knew they were going to be docked, and they were running, or they were taking their kids to school and trying to find a ride. And I know you've told me some amazing things that have happened when people really got into the simulation.
Yes, and also at the end when people share their feelings. I did one where a counselor from one of the school districts was actually, when she was giving her impressions, started to cry. She said that she was dealing with a young lady who had a baby, was 17 years old, was not living at home, yet working and coming to school and making sure that the baby was cared for. And she said, I guess I really didn't understand all the things that she was up against until in this simulation I was portraying someone in that role.
Oh.
And another time, at the end, we were sharing one person who had played the role of a retired elderly person, shared their experiences of growing up in poverty and how what these people were experiencing was true, but that actually it could be even far worse, and you could hear a pin drop.
Oh, okay. So that in part is the purpose, is putting people beyond the data, the statistics, and having them walk in someone else's shoes. And I imagine this is particularly important for educators. Who's the intended audience for this simulation program?
When they actually put it together, as their name says, community action, they put it together so that communities could use this as a tool to have people see each other as people. And that it encourages in the materials that are given out, if you're doing this in a community, to actually include people that are at or below the poverty level.
In the simulation?
Yes.
Those who are living it?
Right.
Well, I imagine that adds to the experience for everyone. And then at the end, you do a debriefing. What are some of the things that you've learned from the debriefing? And is it different for different groups?
Every single one has been different.
Yeah.
Every single time I do the simulation again, I'm surprised at some of the things that come out they haven't thought about before. What do I think people learn? I think they learn how to walk in another person's shoes. They learn empathy, feelings, which aren't things that you can get from reading a book about poverty or going and listening to someone lecture. Are there some people that treat it as a joke? Yes, but not very many. Now, I would say that if you were doing it with a community organization, with a different cross-section of people, you might see some different outcomes.
Okay. And you personally, and just, you've done what, 25, 30 of these? Has this changed how you look at poverty and people living in poverty?
I think from some of the experiences I had growing up in a rural area, because Ballston Spa is not rural anymore, but it was 67 years ago. I think from living in Michigan and working in a very poor district there, and then in two other districts that were also impoverished, and then working in a more well-to-do district in East Lansing, Michigan, and then coming to Watertown as it was expanding with Fort Drum, and then being in Herman DeKalb for as many years as I was, that I've seen a lot of different kinds of poverty. I think that my role has been to help the people that are working with these students and these families understand what it's like to be in that role. One year at Herman DeKalb, we took all this faculty at the beginning of the school year on 2 buses and really did a tour of the district so people could see where some of these students lived.
That must have been an eye-opener.
It was.
Wow. I know in my experience in education, every so often you would visit a student, a family, and they were living in what would have been an outbuilding on a farm with dirt floors and maybe the same quality of, you know, animals just roaming freely through it. And yet, when they came to school, the expectations for them were the same.
Correct.
Oh my gosh. So, if a group is interested in doing this, what would you recommend?
If they're interested in doing this poverty simulation, currently I have 3 kits at my disposal. One's owned by the St. Lawrence Valley Teachers Center, one is owned by BOCES, and one is owned by the Jefferson Lewis Teachers Center. To contact me by phone or email, and I will work with any agency to see if we can put one of these together. Most of them that I've done over the last 2 years have been through the Teacher Center and through BOCES, because BOCES wrote a grant in June of 2016 that funded all 18 school districts in that BOCES to work with the homeless students in their districts. And part of the expectation was that every district would do this simulation for its staff members.
And has that already happened? Is it?
I have one more that I'm doing in Governor on March 29th, and I'll do 2 sessions.
And I've seen all of the bins and crates that you bring to a simulation, and I cannot imagine how much detail goes into every person, every 80 of those people and families, and then all of the community members, giving them the details and all the artifacts that they need is just mind-boggling. I don't know how you do it. It must be so time-consuming.
The simulation kit is amazing because they thought of just about everything. It does have a number of pieces, and a lot of them are color-coded. After it's used, I ask people to put everything back in their packets that they currently have in their possession. We put everything in the bins, and then I take them and repack them, and it usually takes between 5.5 and 6 hours to repack a kit.
Oh my word. Now when you say everything they have in their possession, that just reminded me that there is sort of a rogue player here. I can't remember
The illegal activities person?
Yes, an illegal activities person, and I guess you would find that person in most neighborhoods of poverty. Would you describe the role of that person?
That person has a gun, a plastic gun, a wallet with some money in it, and some either sugar packets or sweetener packets that are supposed to represent drugs. And they kind of mill about and see what they can steal, or who they can get to steal for them, or who they can sell drugs to.
So, it's not just the butcher and the baker and whatever.
Right.
Amazing. And tell me about the one incident where someone stole a gun and was going to rob. I can't remember because so much was going on.
Well, the illegal activities person has a gun. Obviously, the police officer has a gun. And then at the pawn shop, you can also go and buy guns if you go and get an application for a gun permit from the police department, fill it out, get approved, and then you can go buy a gun.
Wow. This all in 4 15-minute
Right.
weeks and weekends. Oh my gosh. So ideally, what impact do you think, if this is widely disseminated, what impact do you hope this would have on the North Country?
I hope that it would give all people the understanding of what it's like to live in rural poverty, and be able to be compassionate and empathetic, and be supportive of different programs that will help these people move on to jobs, go to school, whatever they need to do to make themselves better people.
Okay. Is there anything else that, I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface on this because it's a huge program, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, what I just said with better people, we all can be better people by learning about our fellow man, by helping one another. And I think it's really important for not just educators to understand this.
Excuse me, I don't know how that happened. Go on.
So just that people get that understanding and are able to work together better. And the city of Watertown has received a grant to work on this, and it's a community-wide committee that is currently putting programs into place and has met for, I believe, over a year now.
So you've worked in Jefferson and Lewis County schools.
Right.
And St. Lawrence also. When do you hang up your hat, or are you going to continue this?
I've got 2 more, as I said, March 29th in Governor, and I don't have any scheduled beyond that, but I do know that there are other school districts that are looking into it for the future.
Excellent. Okay, so is there anyone else taking over from you, or is it?
I'll do it as long as they want me to, and there's a need for it.
Well, my hero. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for viewing. Our time is up. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters, filmed here in the Potsdam Public Library, the Fred W. Cleveland Computer Center. This show is a civic collaboration among the St. Lawrence branch of the American Association of University Women, the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.